You know, I was lying in bed last night, staring at the ceiling, just waiting to drift off, and I had this thought. It's one of those thoughts that, it only hits you at like 11:30 p.m. when you're trying to force your brain to just shut up.
Mm.
We spend, what, a third of our lives asleep?
Give or take, yes.
Right.
If you live to be 75, you are looking at roughly 25 years spent in that state. It is a massive chunk of our existence.
Right. And for most of us, looking at it from the outside, it feels like nothing. It feels like the computer just shuts down. You hit the power button, the screen goes black, the fans spin down, and then 8 hours later, hopefully it boots back up. It's just time off.
It is a very common analogy. It's
Yeah.
also fundamentally biologically wrong.
I had a feeling you were going to say that based on the reading for today.
It's probably the biggest misconception we have about our own biology. The brain is never off.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, describing sleep or these other states of consciousness as the brain shutting down misses the entire point of neurophysiology.
The entire point.
Yeah. Even when you are completely unconscious, dead to the world, there's a complex, roaring electrical storm happening inside your skull. It's just changing its rhythm. It's shifting gears, not turning off the engine.
And that is exactly what we are digging into today. We are looking at a massive stack of research covering Chapter 60, States of Brain Activity. And folks, when I say massive, I mean we are covering the entire architecture of human consciousness. We aren't just talking about why you feel groggy in the morning. We're talking about the why behind sleep, the electrical language of brain waves, and what happens when those signals go rogue. I mean, epilepsy, psychosis, dementia.
We're going to cover the whole spectrum. We have to understand the machine when it's working perfectly during sleep to understand how it breaks down in disease.
And the mission here is specific. I don't want to just list symptoms. The sources we have go deep into the mechanism. Why does the brain decide to paralyze your muscles when you dream? Why does a seizure march across the body like a wave? We want to get under the hood.
Exactly. We are moving from the what to the why down to the cellular and chemical level. We're talking about active inhibitory processes, neurotransmitters, and ion channels. It's the difference between, driving a car and knowing how to rebuild the transmission.
I love that. Okay, let's unpack this. I want to start with that feeling of drifting off. Because physiologically, there is a very distinct line between sleep and coma, isn't there? I think we use those terms pretty loosely. I was in a food coma. But medically, they are worlds apart.
They are worlds apart, and the definition hinges on one specific capability.
Yeah.
Arousal.
Arousal.
Right. Sleep is defined as a state of unconsciousness from which a person can be aroused by sensory or other stimuli. If I shake you or if a loud alarm goes off, your brain can bridge that gap back to wakefulness.
Yeah.
The pathways are intact. They are just inhibited.
Whereas a coma
is unconsciousness from which a person cannot be aroused. That's the critical biological distinction. Even if I shout in your ear or shake you, the brain in a coma cannot engage the mechanisms required to wake up. It's a structural or metabolic failure, not a functional state.
So sleep is a reversible state, a functional state. But within the realm of sleep itself, it's not just one monotonic hum, is it? We often think of sleep as a single block of time. I slept for 8 hours. But the research shows it's actually a highly structured architecture.
Oh, it's incredibly structured. It's a cycle.
Yeah.
You don't just fall into one state and stay there. We oscillate between two major, fundamentally different states: slow wave sleep and rapid eye movement, or REM sleep.
And they are almost opposites in terms of what the brain is doing.
They really are. It's like a tug of war that happens all night long, back and forth.
So let's dive into the weird one first. REM, rapid eye movement. The sources call this paradoxical sleep. Why paradoxical? That sounds like a riddle.
It is a bit of a biological riddle. It's called paradoxical because if I were to hook you up to an EEG, an electroencephalogram, during REM sleep, your brain waves would look almost exactly like they do right now.
Well, I'm wide awake and talking to you.
Exactly. You see these high-frequency beta waves.
So if a doctor just walked in and looked at the EEG chart, they'd say, oh, he's awake, but I'm actually asleep.
You are technically asleep, yes. In fact, you are incredibly difficult to wake up from REM sleep. But here is the kicker. Your brain metabolism, the amount of energy your brain is burning, can actually increase by up to 20% during REM.
Wait, 20% more than when I'm awake?
Yes, more than when you're awake and actively thinking. Your brain is running a marathon, but your body is completely still.
That's the paradox. High activity upstairs, zero activity downstairs.
Well, not just zero activity, it's enforced inactivity. This is one of the most fascinating mechanisms in the text. During REM, there is an active inhibition of spinal muscle control. Your brainstem sends a powerful signal down the spinal cord to essentially cut the power to your skeletal muscles. Muscle tone is exceedingly depressed.
It's a safety feature.
Precisely. Because REM is where the vivid dreaming happens. The really narrative, movie-like dreams. If that paralysis mechanism didn't exist, you would physically act out every single movement in your dream.
Oh, wow.
If you're running from a tiger in your dream, your legs would be thrashing in bed. You'd be punching the wall. The brain has to paralyze the body to protect it from the mind.
That is terrifying and cool at the same time. It's like a biological straitjacket. But it's not total paralysis, right? Because the name is rapid eye movement.
Right. The eyes are the big exception. Despite the extreme inhibition of the peripheral muscles, your arms, your legs, your core, the eyes are darting back and forth furiously under the eyelids. Also, your heart rate and your respiratory rate become irregular, a very volatile physiological state, almost like a stress state.
And the sources mention that this happens in episodes. It's not like you hit REM and just stay there for hours.
No, it's cyclical. In a young adult, REM sleep happens in these bouts that last anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes, and they appear roughly every 90 minutes. But here is where it gets interesting for anyone trying to, optimize their sleep. The duration of these REM bouts increases as the night goes on.
So the longer I sleep, the more REM I get.
Exactly. Your first REM cycle of the night might be very short, maybe just 5 minutes. But by the early morning hours, after you've been asleep for 6 or 7 hours, those REM periods get much, much longer. That's why you so often wake up right out of a vivid dream in the morning. You're spending more time in that state right before you wake up.
That makes so much sense. Okay, so that's the high-energy, vivid dreaming, paradoxical state. Now, what about the other side of the coin? Slow-wave sleep.
Slow-wave sleep is the bedrock. This is the deep, restful sleep. While REM is paradoxical, slow wave is exactly what you imagine sleep should be. The brain waves slow way, way down to these massive, rolling delta waves.
And physiologically, everything drops. Like the whole system just cools down.
Everything drops. We see a decrease in what we call the vegetative functions. Your blood pressure drops, your respiratory rate slows down, and your basal metabolic rate, the energy your body burns just to exist, decreases by about 10 to 30%.
So this is the recovery mode. This is where the engine actually cools down and repairs itself.
It is. This occurs mostly in the first hour or so after you fall asleep. If you've been awake for many, many hours, your body dives into this deep, slow-wave sleep first. It prioritizes it. It's incredibly difficult to wake someone up from this state. They are far deeper under than they are in REM.
Now, you mentioned dreaming happens in REM, but the text says something interesting about slow-wave sleep. It's often called dreamless sleep, but that's not entirely true, is it?
No, strictly speaking, it's not dreamless. Dreams do occur in slow-wave sleep, and surprisingly, even nightmares can happen here. But there is a key difference. The dreams in REM are the movie-like, narrative, vivid experiences. The mental activity in slow-wave sleep is, well, it's distinct.
How so? What's the difference?
It's usually not consolidated into memory. That's the absolute key.
So we might be dreaming, but the save file function is broken.
In a manner of speaking, yes. The consolidation of the dreams in memory doesn't occur efficiently in slow-wave sleep. So you might have these mental experiences, these thoughts or images, but they vanish the moment you wake up. You have no access to them.
That's a haunting thought, actually, that we are experiencing things we can't recall. We'll come back to that later because it has some pretty big existential implications. But I want to pivot to the mechanism. We've described the REM and the slow wave, but how does the brain actually fall asleep?
This is where the history of science is really interesting. There was an old theory, a very intuitive one, that neurons just got tired.
Like a battery running out. You use the brain all day, the energy fades, and you just shut down.
Right. The idea was that the excitatory areas of the brainstem, specifically the reticular activating system which keeps us awake, just fatigued over the day and stopped firing. A passive shutdown.
But the sources say that's been completely debunked.
Completely debunked. We now know that sleep is caused by an active inhibitory process. You don't just fall asleep, your brain puts you to sleep. It actively slams on the brakes.
Okay, active inhibition. So who is pressing the brake pedal? What part of the brain is responsible for this?
There are specific sleep centers. The most conspicuous one, the one we know the most about, involves the Rho nuclei.
Rho nucleo. Okay, that's in the lower half of the pons and medulla, right? Deep in the brainstem.
Correct. Deep in the brainstem. These nuclei are a thin sheet of special neurons, and they send fibers everywhere, up to the thalamus and hypothalamus, into the limbic system, and crucially down into the spinal cord.
And what chemical are they using to send this sleep signal? What's the message?
The primary neurotransmitter is serotonin. Many of the nerve endings from these Raphe neurons secrete serotonin.
Serotonin. See, this is one of those things that I think would confuse people. I feel like most people associate serotonin with happiness or with treating depression,
Yeah.
SSRIs and all that.
It does many, many things, but in this context, it is the key initiator of sleep. The evidence is just. It's incredibly compelling. If you administer a drug to an animal that blocks the formation of serotonin, that animal cannot sleep.
At all.
For days. It creates a state of permanent wakefulness until it dies.
So serotonin released from the Raphe nuclei is essentially the chemical signal that says it is time to inhibit the waking centers.
That's wild. And the text also mentions another area, the nucleus of the tractus solitarius. Yes. This is the termination point for visceral sensory signals, signals from your gut, your heart, your internal organs. Stimulation here can also induce sleep, which might explain why a heavy meal or certain internal states can make us so drowsy.
The famous food coma. It's not just a saying, it's actual anatomy at work.
In a way, yes. It's those signals entering the medulla and triggering that same inhibitory pathway.
Okay, I have to ask about the sleep substance. This section of the reading felt like science fiction. Is there an actual sleep juice floating around in our brains?
Sleep juice, I like that.
Yeah.
Scientists have been hunting for a sleep substance for a very long time. The idea is that if you stay awake, some chemical builds up in your blood or your cerebrospinal fluid, the CSF, that literally forces you to sleep. And they found something called murmyl peptide.
Murmyl peptide. Sounds like something you'd buy at a health food store, but I'm guessing it's not.
No. It's a low molecular weight substance that accumulates in the CSF of sleep-deprived animals. And this is powerful stuff. If you take just micrograms of this peptide, tiny, tiny amounts, and inject it into the third ventricle of a well-rested animal's brain,
What happens?
it will fall into a natural sleep almost immediately.
And stay asleep.
For hours.
Yeah.
It perfectly mimics the natural accumulation of sleep pressure.
That is incredibly potent. So we have these anatomical centers like the Raphe nuclei and these chemical substances like murmyl peptide. But how does the brain toggle between being awake and being asleep? Why don't we just stay asleep once the serotonin hits?
That brings us to the wakefulness-sleep cycle. Think of it as a feedback loop or a biological tug of war. We have the reticular activating nuclei, let's call them the wakefulness team.
Yeah.
When they're active, they stimulate the cortex and the peripheral nervous system. That activity sends positive feedback signals back to the wakefulness team, keeping them active. It's a self-reinforcing loop.
So the activity feeds itself. It's a self-sustaining fire. Once you're up, you tend to stay up.
Exactly. But after hours and hours of firing, those wakefulness neurons eventually fatigue. Their signal weakens. This creates an opening, and it allows the sleep team, the sleep centers we just discussed, to take over. They start actively inhibiting the wakefulness centers, driving the activity down, and that's when you fall asleep.
And then the reverse happens over the course of the night.
Yes. The sleep neurons burn through their neurotransmitters or they fatigue, the inhibition fades, and the wakefulness centers, which are now rested and restored, roar back to life. It's a beautiful, self-regulating oscillation that happens every single day.
Speaking of regulators, we have to talk about orexin, or, as it's also called, hypocretin. The source mentions this specifically in the context of narcolepsy.
Orexin is crucial. It's a neuropeptide that's produced in the hypothalamus. Its main job is to provide excitatory input to keep the rest of the brain awake. Think of orexin as the stabilizer. It's the chemical that prevents that wake-sleep switch from flipping accidentally.
It's like the lock on the door that keeps you in the awake room.
That's a great way to put it. And when that stabilizer is missing, we get narcolepsy. Narcolepsy is essentially a loss of orexin signaling. Without that chemical stabilizer, the brain can't maintain the wake state against the constant pressure from the sleep centers.
And the symptoms are so dramatic. It's not just about being tired.
No, it's overwhelming. Overwhelming daytime drowsiness is the hallmark. But the most striking symptom, the one that really defines the disorder, is cataplexy.
This is the one that always just blows my mind.
Cataplexy is a sudden loss of muscle tone. Very similar to the paralysis that happens in REM sleep, but it happens while you are fully awake. And it's triggered by strong emotion.
Any emotion.
Usually positive ones like laughter or surprise or excitement. A person might hear a funny joke, start to laugh, and suddenly just collapse to the floor because their muscles give out completely.
So it's like the REM paralysis switch gets hit by accident because of an emotional surge.
That is a very good way to visualize it. The barrier between the waking state and the REM state is porous in these patients because orexin isn't there to reinforce the wall.
So we've covered the how of sleep. Now the big existential question, the why. Why do we even do this? What is the purpose of spending a third of our lives unconscious?
It's the million-dollar question in neuroscience, and we still don't have a complete answer. But we know it's essential for survival. The source describes what happens when you take it away, and it's like a kill switch of sorts.
A kill switch.
Well, if you deprive rats of sleep entirely, they die within 2 to 3 weeks.
Wow. That fast. Is that faster than starvation?
In some cases, yes. And we don't know exactly why they die. It's not just exhaustion. But the evidence suggests that the lack of sleep affects the central nervous system first and most severely. The leading theory right now is that the principal value of sleep is restoring natural balances among the neuronal centers.
Neural balance. What does that mean in practical terms?
Throughout the day, your neurons are firing, synapses are strengthening or weakening, you're learning things, you're experiencing things. Sleep allows for a resetting of these excitability thresholds, a kind of system-wide recalibration. It's also about clearance. The brain is an incredibly metabolically active organ, and it generates waste products.
Right.
During sleep, specifically during that deep, slow-wave sleep, the brain essentially flushes these toxins out. The space between cells actually increases to allow cerebrospinal fluid to wash through.
So it's the janitorial shift. The cleaners come in when the office is empty and take out the trash.
Exactly. Without that clearance, the machinery starts to gum up, leading to cognitive decline, hallucinations, and eventually total system failure.
That actually segues perfectly into our next segment. We've been talking about brain activity firing, inhibition, storms, but how do we actually see this? We need to talk about the EEG.
The electroencephalogram, the window into the brain's electrical life.
Right. The electrical language of the brain. We touched on it a bit, how RM looks like wakefulness, but let's really break down the different letters of this alphabet. We have alpha, beta, theta, and delta. But first, what are we actually measuring on the scalp?
Good question. It's important to be clear on that. We are measuring electrical potentials from the surface of the scalp. And these are tiny, tiny voltages. We're talking 0 to 200 microvolts.
And for a wave to even show up on the paper, it can't just be one neuron firing, right? It has to be a whole group.
Oh, absolutely not. A single neuron is far too quiet. For an EEG to pick up a signal, millions of neurons must fire synchronously, in unison.
Is there an analogy for this?
Imagine a massive football stadium. If everyone is just talking to their neighbor, all you hear from outside is a low, indistinct hum. That's desynchronized activity, like beta waves. But if 100,000 people all start clapping their hands at the exact same rhythm,
You hear a loud, clear beat.
that's synchronized activity.
Oh.
The EEG picks up the clapping, not the whispering.
Got it. Okay, so let's go through the waves, the different rhythms. Start with alpha.
Alpha waves are rhythmic waves. They happen at about 8 to 13 cycles per second. This is the sound of quiet wakefulness. If you sit down, close your eyes, and just relax, you're not sleeping, just resting, your brain produces these beautiful, strong alpha waves. They're most intense in the occipital region, which is the visual processing center at the back of your brain.
And then we have beta, the faster one.
Beta waves are faster, greater than 14 cycles per second. They're low voltage, but high frequency. This is alert wakefulness.
So this is what's happening right now as we have this conversation. My brain is producing beta waves.
Yes. When your attention is directed to a specific mental activity, your neurons are firing rapidly, but they aren't all firing together. It's that asynchronous whispering. And this leads to a really cool phenomenon called the alpha block.
Explain the alpha block.
It's a simple experiment you can do in any neurolab. You have someone sit and relax with their eyes closed, and you see those nice rhythmic alpha waves on the screen. The moment they open their eyes, the alpha waves disappear instantly. And they're replaced by the low-voltage, high-frequency beta waves.
Just from opening your eyes, because the visual input disrupts the synchrony.
Exactly. The sudden flood of visual sensation causes immediate cessation of the synchronized alpha rhythm. The brain shifts from a kind of idle state to active processing.
Okay, moving down the spectrum in terms of speed, theta waves.
Theta waves are slower, about 4 to 7 cycles per second. These are perfectly normal in children. In adults, however, they typically appear during periods of emotional stress, specifically things like disappointment or frustration.
That's interesting. So if I'm having a really, really bad day at work, my EEG might show theta waves.
It might. They are also found in many degenerative brain states. So seeing persistent theta waves in an alert, otherwise healthy adult is usually a sign that something is wrong physiologically.
And finally, the slowest of them all, delta.
The slowest of them all. Less than 3.5 cycles per second. These are the big, rolling waves of deep, slow-wave sleep.
And infancy, right? The text mentioned that.
Yes, very common in infants. But in an adult, Seeing delta waves means that the cortex is effectively disconnected from the activating signals from the thalamus and brainstem. The cortex is released from that activating influence and falls into its own slow, massive, synchronized rhythm.
It's fascinating how these electrical patterns correlate so perfectly with our conscious state, but, and here is the big pivot, what happens when the electrical system crashes? What happens when that synchrony goes haywire? We need to talk about epilepsy.
Yes, epilepsy is essentially a disruption of the normal, delicate balance between inhibitory and excitatory currents in the brain. It is uncontrolled, excessive neuronal activity.
A literal electrical storm.
An electrical storm is the perfect description.
The sources break this down into focal seizures and generalized seizures. Let's start with focal or partial seizures.
Focal seizures start in a small, localized region of the brain. The trigger point, the focus, could be some scar tissue, a tumor, or an area that was destroyed from a previous injury or stroke.
And this leads to one of the most vivid descriptions in the entire text, the Jacksonian March.
The Jacksonian March is a classic presentation of a focal seizure that begins in the motor cortex. You have to picture the map of your body that's laid out on your brain, the motor homunculus. The area for the foot is next to the leg, which is next to the hand, which is next to the face and mouth.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
If a seizure discharge starts in the mouth area of the cortex, the person's mouth might start twitching. But then that electrical discharge spreads to the adjacent neurons. It physically moves across the brain tissue. So the twitching might spread from the mouth to the hand, then to the arm, then down to the leg.
It literally marches across the body as the storm spreads across the brain.
Exactly. You can watch the electrical storm travel across the cortex by watching the person's body. It's a physical manifestation of brain geography. It's really quite incredible.
That is incredibly specific. And then there are psychomotor seizures. These sound more complex, less about movement.
These usually involve the limbic system, particularly the temporal lobe. And because the limbic system controls things like emotion and memory, the symptoms are often bizarre and can be mistaken for psychiatric issues. A seizure might cause sudden emotional changes, amnesia, or what are called automatisms.
Automatisms.
Repetitive, strange, purposeless movements. Things like chewing or lip smacking or picking at their clothing over and over. The person is technically conscious in a way,
Yeah.
but they are not there. They might stare blankly and perform these robotic actions with no memory of it afterward.
Then we have the generalized seizures, the ones people typically think of when they hear the word epilepsy, the grand mal seizure.
Right. The proper term is a generalized tonic-clonic seizure. Tonic refers to the stiffening phase, and clonic refers to the jerking phase.
What is happening in the brain during a grand mal? Is it starting from one spot?
No, this is a massive discharge that seems to involve the entire brain at once and transmits into the entire spinal cord. It causes an abrupt, total loss of consciousness. The person falls. First, there is a generalized tonic seizure. Every muscle in the body stiffens. Then, it transitions to the clonic phase, which is alternating tonic and spasmodic contractions.
And this is where you see the dangerous physical signs, biting the tongue, difficulty breathing.
Yes. Cyanosis. The person can start to turn blue because breathing is compromised. Urination and defecation can occur because all sphincter control is lost. And after the seizure stops, after maybe a minute or two, there is the postictal depression.
The reboot phase.
A very slow reboot. The nervous system is utterly fatigued. The person remains in stupor for minutes to hours. It's a massive metabolic event for the brain.
On the complete other end of that spectrum, there's absent seizures or petit mal.
These are so deceptive. They usually happen in childhood or adolescence. It's not a dramatic convulsion. It involves just 3 to 30 seconds of unconsciousness. The child might just stop what they're doing and stare or blink their eyes rapidly.
I have heard that teachers used to think these kids were just daydreaming or not paying attention.
Very often, yes.
Yeah.
But if you were to hook them up to an EEG during one of these episodes, it shows a very specific, very dramatic spike and dome pattern. They're having a seizure, they're unconscious, but they recover so rapidly and return to normal almost immediately that it can go unnoticed for years.
So how do we treat this? How do we stop these electrical storms? The text gets very specific about the mechanisms of anti-epileptic drugs. It's not just about calming the brain in a general sense.
No, it's about targeting specific ion channels and neurotransmitter systems.
Yeah.
We have 4 main ways to stop a seizure. First, you can block voltage-dependent sodium channels. If you block sodium from rushing into the neuron, it can't fire as easily. You're preventing the spark from starting the fire.
Okay, that makes sense.
Second, you can alter calcium currents, which are also critical for neuronal firing and neurotransmitter release. Third, you can increase the activity of GABA. GABA is the brain's main inhibitory neurotransmitter. It's the universal brake pedal. So we're just pumping the brakes harder.
And the fourth way would be the opposite of that.
Exactly. You inhibit glutamate. Glutamate is the main excitatory neurotransmitter. It's the gas pedal. So you can either pump the brakes or you can cut the gas line.
It's amazing how precise pharmacological interventions have become. We're essentially fine-tuning the engine while it's running at 100 miles an hour.
That's a very good analogy.
Yeah.
And that precision leads us directly into the final frontier of our discussion today. The neurochemistry of behavior, things like psychoses and dementia, because these are also issues of chemical balance, just playing out over a much longer timeline.
Let's start with depression and bipolar disorder. What is the prevailing theory here on a chemical level?
The leading theory is the monoamine hypothesis. The idea is that depression is likely caused by a diminished formation of either norepinephrine or serotonin in the brain.
And these are the chemicals produced in those pleasure and reward centers that we touched on earlier.
Yes, specifically the locus coeruleus, which produces norepinephrine, and those Raphe nuclei we talked about for sleep, which produce serotonin. When these centers aren't producing enough of these chemicals or the signals aren't getting through properly, we see the symptoms of depression: grief, unhappiness, a total lack of drive.
And the evidence for this is largely pharmacological, right? We kind of figured this out backward because of how the drugs work.
Correct. It was an observation. We noticed that certain drugs that block norepinephrine secretion, used for other conditions, would cause depression as a side effect. Conversely, we found that drugs that increase the amount of these neurotransmitters in the synapse, like MAO inhibitors or tricyclic antidepressants, are effective at treating depression.
And mania in bipolar disorder.
Mania is often the flip side of that coin. It's associated with an excess of drive and excess of psychomotor balance. This is why a drug like lithium is effective for bipolar disorder. It seems to dampen the formation and release of norepinephrine and serotonin, clipping the extreme highs of mania.
Then there is schizophrenia. This seems to be the opposite problem chemically in some ways.
In many ways, yes. The leading theory for schizophrenia is the dopamine hypothesis. It suggests that the disorder is caused by an excess of dopamine, or perhaps by hypersensitive dopamine receptors.
And the anatomy involved points to the prefrontal lobes and the hippocampus.
Yes. The prefrontal lobes are involved in signal processing, making sense of the world. The hippocampus is crucial for behavioral control and memory. When you flood these areas with too much dopamine, you get the classic symptoms: auditory hallucinations, delusions of grandeur, paranoia, incoherent speech. The brain's signal-to-noise ratio is just completely broken.
And again, the evidence comes from the drugs.
Right. It's a powerful piece of the puzzle. Drugs that decrease dopamine's effects, like chlorpromazine, are effective at alleviating the positive symptoms. And tragically, we also know that certain dopamine-secreting tumors can actually induce schizophrenia-like symptoms in people who were previously perfectly healthy. You remove the tumor, the dopamine levels go down, and the psychosis resolves. It's a stark demonstration of the chemical basis of the behavior.
Finally, let's talk about Alzheimer's disease. This isn't just a chemical imbalance. This feels different. This is physical destruction.
Alzheimer's is defined as the premature aging of the brain. It's a progressive, heartbreaking loss of memory and cognitive function. But when you look at the pathology, the physical evidence under a microscope, it's striking.
You're talking about the beta amyloid plaque.
Exactly. We see an accumulation of these dense, sticky peptide plaques. They range from just 10 micrometers up to several hundred micrometers in diameter. They're scattered throughout the cerebral cortex, the hippocampus, and the basal ganglia, physically disrupting the neuronal networks.
It's like gunk building up in the gears of a complex machine.
It's a very good analogy. And it's not just the plaques. There's a very strong vascular connection. Cerebrovascular disease, things like high blood pressure, atherosclerosis, contribute significantly to the progression of the disease. The text mentions silent strokes, small brain infarcts that you might not even notice individually, but cumulatively, they accelerate the cognitive decline.
And there's a major genetic component, too, with this ApoE4 gene.
Yes, that gene is involved in transporting cholesterol in the brain. The ApoE4 variant is faulty, and it seems to lead to an accelerated buildup of that amyloid gunk. It's really a perfect storm of metabolic issues, vascular disease, and genetic predisposition.
Okay, let's take a breath. We have covered a massive amount of ground. from the firing of a single neuron in REM sleep to the accumulation of physical plaques in Alzheimer's.
It's a lot to take in. It's the full life cycle of the brain's activity and its potential failures.
If we zoom out, what is the big picture here? What's the thread that connects the sleep cycles to the seizures to the dementia?
For me, the connecting thread is the incredibly delicate balance of excitation and inhibition. The brain is not a static machine. It is a constant dynamic equilibrium.
It's a continuous tightrope walk.
Precisely. Sleep is the active, controlled inhibition of wakefulness. Epilepsy is the catastrophic failure of inhibition. Psychosis is a profound imbalance of excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmitters. Everything depends on this precise moment-to-moment tuning of electrical and chemical signals.
And when we look at the so what for the listener, what's the takeaway?
The so what is that this machinery is biological. It's not magic. It requires maintenance. The text highlights how sleep deprivation physically damages the system. It highlights how good cardiovascular health directly protects the brain from the pathologies of Alzheimer's. Understanding that your brain is an organ subject to wear and tear, requiring clearance of toxins, requiring chemical balance, it should change how you treat it.
It makes a term like sleep hygiene sound less like a soft lifestyle tip and more like a critical survival tactic.
It absolutely is. You are protecting your neural balance.
Yeah.
You are running the janitorial cycle every night. It's not optional.
I want to leave our listeners with one final thought, something that really, really stuck with me from that slow wave sleep section.
Oh, what?
We talked about how we dream in deep sleep, but because memory consolidation is effectively turned off, we don't remember any of it. The text says consolidation in memory does not occur.
Yes. That's the key distinction from REM dreams.
It just makes me wonder, if we are spending hours every single night in this deep, dream-filled state, experiencing things, feeling things, but we never save the file, are we living a completely different life for a third of our existence that we simply cannot access?
It's a profound question. Are we awake to a different reality that simply vanishes every single morning?
Exactly. Are there parts of our personality or our subconscious that are evolving and living in that dark room and we just never get to see the footage?
It certainly challenges the definition of self, doesn't it? If you experience something but you don't remember it, did it happen to you?
Something to mull over tonight while you're waiting for those alpha waves to kick in. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Always a pleasure.
We'll catch you on the next one.